did a good
absolutely.
job. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I guess we should move on to our next show that we have semi been talking about, but we left it until it was completely done to really have a full, I guess, understanding of this show. And this is the Damon Lindelof version of Watchmen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think right off the bat, I said in the first 2 or 3 episodes that this show is not really related to the comics. Like, it is, but it's like its own version.
No, it is related.
It is related, but like I feel like the connective tissue between the show and what is kind of shown in the comics is like it's very separate, and it doesn't really need to happen in a way. Like, I feel like the Watchmen part of this, like what makes Watchmen does not exist in this TV show. I feel like they just had the name slapped on the characters and did its own thing, and I still believe that after watching all the episodes of this, aside from like maybe 1 or 2 episodes where clearly they made an attempt to be like, this is Watchmen, see, remember Watchmen and this character and all that, but other from that, there is nothing connective. I think that isn't it shouldn't, like, it doesn't have to be called Watchmen. I think this movie this TV show is I don't know, it's very weird. This for me, this show is very weird. Like, it's shot competently, the acting's done really nice, set design, costume, it's all beautiful, but the content in and of itself and the way certain, I guess, choices and things I just don't see / get that, where it kind of goes, especially around the end. There's a lot of unanswered type of questions, like a Damon Lindelof type of thing, where why did you make this decision of X, and we don't really get anything for it, type of thing. So I think my whole thing is, I think for me, I'm very mixed on Watchmen, what it tries to be.
Oh yeah, I mean, you're definitely far more nice than me about this show. This show, while having interesting ideas within the Watchmen universe and trying to kind of come up with its own kind of internal lore, like even David Lindelof doesn't like calling it a continuation. He kind of or he calls it a remix. Ooh, right? And essentially it's hot trash. Like, this is what I said about the show. Like, the thing is, everything that you said is completely correct, right? It looks great. It's filmed very nice, and there is like the odd episode or two where, okay, yeah, like this is got like some really interesting things that are going on with the show. The problem is, a lot of it just seems to be like doing edgy shit for the sake of doing edgy shit. A lot of it seems to, for example, all the stuff with Ozymandias's background and stuff. Like, yeah, again, spoilers for the show going forward, but like, yeah, like, you kind of figure out that yes, he is more than likely on another planet, and that he's trying to get off the planet. It doesn't
with
take
a bunch of clones, yeah.
With using a bunch of clones, right? It doesn't take, the big reveal where he's sent out of the like actual biome that was created. It doesn't take that long for you to figure that out. Like, you can anybody with 2 like brain cells can figure out that there's something more to what's going on with it. And it just doesn't, the payoff isn't that great either, because essentially all that really happens is Ozymandias gets saved by, as you find out, his daughter, who eventually kind of like takes over his like kind of his company and stuff like that. You kind of find out towards the end, and you find out that like, oh, like some random Vietnamese housekeeper like stole his semen and like impregnated herself with her child. Like, okay, like, yeah, that is kind of Watchmen-esque. Like, I'll give it to them. Like, that did feel like oh gee, like, imagine having that particular origin and that kind of what is it, like, legacy. Like, that's who your father is, and you're not really like someone that he would even respect. And you kind of see that in the show with his relationship with his daughter. But all the other stuff in the show, like, I think probably the best episode is episode 5, which is A Little Fear of Lightning, which is essentially about Looking Glass slash
Totally
Mirror
agreed.
Guy.
Totally agreed. He is probably the best character out of this whole thing as well.
Yeah. He's also supposed to be. He's also probably the best character also, because again, a lot of the characters in the show are supposed to at least be somewhat analogous to characters in the Watchmen comics. There's a lot of references to him. It's also based for anybody who isn't familiar with Watchmen. It is based off the graphic novel and not off the movie that came out. So we have giant octopus creatures and psychic attacks. But again, you see, as somebody who watched and read the graphic novel, I don't know how well this series did at explaining the events of the Watchmen comic book. Personally, I feel like it didn't, but I have read online, and a lot of people did feel like, I totally understood what was going on. Like, it made sense. But
No,
I don't know.
I don't know. I feel like people were just saying that for the saying that, and it's like, as I mentioned before, I think all of this is pretty bad. Aside from obviously the design of everything, I think obviously, as you mentioned before, the Looking Glass episode is really great. It gets an origin of that character, and he's very interesting because he's like he's very paranoid of those fake alien attacks that he thinks are real. And he gets really told in the end that, hey, these are all fake.
These are fake. The fact that you use like the reflectine, which is like the reflective, the reason why he wears a reflective mask. Like at first, like, you kind of see it and you're just like, oh, like, why is this dude, he's just wearing that to be edgy, much like how Rorschach wore his mask to kind of like hide his identity and stuff like that. But like later on, there's like a practical reason and a very, internally consistent reason as to why he would wear that material, because it's been sold to these people who were attacked by these psychic during the psychic attack, that it was supposed to protect you from future psychic attacks, and so he's probably spent like thousands of dollars, like hundreds if not thousands of dollars, on these security kits and stuff, and to eventually, as he kind of finds out that like his whole life was a lie, it kind of does really show a lot more about his character and what happens, and the fact that it also furthers the plot of the show, since it does explain the events of it.
Good. However, the thing is, that's a really good story, and it's like, okay, where is he going to go with this? Where's the rest of his story arc? And basically, we completely forget about him, and then he just basically in the last episode, and he's just like, well, the people who told me the truth, I'm still against them because they're white supremacists. To me, I feel like it's like he had this whole thing where it's like his decision was like, am I gonna trust the people who I work for, or am I gonna trust these white supremacists? But they told me the truth. But instead of having any of that, they just like, no, we're gonna skip straight to the end where I'm just the good. I'm gonna do what's right type of thing.
No, you see my problem with it isn't that. But I guess for people who don't know, so there's a murder that happens in Tulsa, which is like where like one of the big kind of massacre of African Americans happened, known as the Black Wall Street Massacre in 1921, I believe. And essentially the main character, she's a descendant of one of the original victims of the Tulsa riots. Her grandfather, who later gets kind of explained to be one of the first vigilantes in the TV in like the Watchmen universe. But that's also retroactively kind of changed because there is the comic book series called Before Watchmen, and the character is a like a Caucasian, like white dude, and not like an African American dude. But again, like, that's where I'm kind of like okay with having like some artistic liberties if they can like explain certain things, right? And they do it. But it's to me, it kind of felt like, oh well, they're doing like like checking off boxes like in the TV series, because it's like, okay, well, we'll make him a minority character. We'll also make him like a LGBT character.
Yeah, they made him gay out of nowhere.
In the comic, no. But here's the thing: in the character is gay in the comic. But the difference is that well, again, he's a white guy, right? And there is a lot of emphasis and focus on his relationship with the leader of the Minutemen, because obviously, like back then, like when that organization was set up, the Minutemen, his character gets exposed as being like a homosexual and stuff. And the thing is, they do show fragments of that in the Minutemen TV series. Like they almost make it like a HBO series within the actual Watchmen universe. But they kind of say, "Oh, this is the like," and they kind of explicitly say, "Oh, that's like a fake version of what really happened," right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like there's like the plot. I even liked the plot with Cyclops. I liked it, right? Like a bunch of people trying to take over the world, right? Through mind control. The problem is, it's like them being white supremacists really kind of doesn't play a factor
Yeah.
into the show outside of the Tulsa riots. Because obviously,
I 100% completely agree. The whole point of them being white supremacists and kind of having this like, we're gonna have like racist commentary in the show does not need to be in the show, and it doesn't really do it any favors. If anything, it'd be better if it was something else. Like, for example, like the whole thing of them being white supremacists could be easily replaced by anything you want, and it doesn't change it. Like if I just change it to eco-terrorists because no one's listening to anyone, so they have to have Dr. Manhattan's powers to save the world, or anything. You could literally change it to anything and it'd be okay. But they choose white supremacy instead because it's a hot topic and our lead character is a person of color. So I feel like and especially around the obviously the end episode, it basically boils up to them not being a threat whatsoever, really. Like they're a threat, but like they don't do anything. It's just there for set up for something else.
This is my problem as well, because essentially you do kind of find out in the past about Cyclops through because that's the main reason why the main character, her grandfather, comes in to try and find her and works with the Vietnamese kind of scientist slash business mogul, right? Is in order to take down Cyclops, because they're using, or they want to use, technology to take over the world, right? Because he took it down last time, and now they're trying to do the same thing, but they're trying to capture Dr. Manhattan. The thing that I'm kind of confused about, and the thing that I think they did really poorly, is they kind of started off by having the senator in episode 5, right? Like, he talks to Looking Glass, and he's like, he even says like, yeah, like, these fucking idiots, like, I'm just using them because as like, I'm just trying to sow discord. Like my main goal is to actually find out where Dr. Manhattan is and capture them. So, it kind of works in a sense that, like, in very much in the real world, like there is an emphasis on, people in power using, terrorist or extremist factions as a means to an end, like using them in proxy wars. Like, that is the basis for the Vietnam War, right? Like, the North Vietnamese, I think, were funded by the Russians, and they were communists, while America funded the South Vietnamese, who were like at least wanted to work in or rather institute a democratic society. And so America and Russia were basically warring against each other technically through proxy wars. And I thought that maybe this was what they were trying to do, like in order to show, oh, well, the whole aspect of them being white supremacists, like, actually didn't function the way that you initially were made to think at the beginning of the show. That it was supposed to kind of just be like a front or to the real issue. But like you said, in the end, like, you have the Vietnamese scientist, True, come in, and she's like, oh yeah, I'm going to kill all of you guys. But then I question, well, why have them even in the plot at all if literally their only function was to build a machine or build a device in order to capture Dr. Manhattan? Like, they even say like, oh, they used like the artificial lithium zinc batteries that Dr. Manhattan used in the watches and various other cars and stuff to build that cage. the Faraday cage or whatever. I forget what exactly that they're called, but it's like, well, True would have all these resources. Why wouldn't she just do it herself?
I know, because she's the smartest person in the world.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm saying. So like, yeah, like, she just,
and even then, her plan really sucks, and it really boils down to nothing. Like in the end, nothing really
it's like,
happens.
Yeah, like, well, here's the thing. They kind of lead it open-ended to be like, oh, well, maybe she survived at the end of that massive explosion. You know what I mean? And then maybe she really does become Dr. Manhattan. We just don't see it. You know what I mean? Like, as in, like, she gets the powers of Dr. Manhattan. Rather, like, the expectation is, like, they destroy the device and it falls on top of her. But do you, like in classic, writing, TV writing, do you see her body? No, you don't. So she could very much be alive. And I think that's the kind of way that they left it on purpose in case HBO does decide to do a second season of the show.
Now, speaking of something that we were talking about the what is it, the Mirror Glass guy. His episode was good. I thought that the Dr. Manhattan episode, which is the penultimate episode, episode 8, was, I think, all right. I think it's mainly because writing the character of Dr. Manhattan is pretty interesting, and you can do some interesting things of a omnivorous being that can be anywhere and any time. I felt like that episode was pretty good.
Yeah. To be fair, like, okay, the thing is, I also like the nostalgia episode where we have the main character. She's going like and reliving like Angela Abar. She's kind of going back and like reliving her memories, and then also it kind of blending into her grandfather's memory as well, right? Like, I actually kind of like that episode too. I think the problem is, like, these episodes could have been written a little bit better without just trying to, like, it just felt very much like, oh, we gotta make these characters African American. Like, we have to make them black in order to, and it wasn't like, when you find out that her husband's actually John, it's not one of those, again, it's like the whole like thing where, oh, like, am I supposed to be surprised that he's John? It's not.
Yeah, they hint on it pretty. I think a lot of people were, because they weren't probably paying attention, but it's pretty obvious. Where he has no memories at the table. There's a lot of, I guess, semi hints.
Here's the thing. They hint at it. Like, for example, like keeps saying how attractive her husband is, and that's like kind of like a bit of a gut kick when you'd find out, oh, well, yeah, that's because he's actually John in disguise, right? But I think the thing is, like, the show, like, it doesn't surprise me at all. It just seemed like, oh, okay, great, so this is the show's bullshit explanation for where Dr. Manhattan was the entire time. That's the way I kind of saw it. It didn't feel like a smart exposition. It didn't feel like a smart reason as to like why he was there. Like, the other thing that has also been coming out that's Watchmen related is Doomsday Clock, which recently finished after 2 years. And by the way, if you haven't read it, you should. It's excellent as the real spiritual successor to the Watchmen TV series.
Thank God.
Watchmen graphic novel. So if you haven't read it, have you read it, Don? No, yes.
I've read a lot of the issues. I haven't read the last issue. Yeah. But essentially, I'm happy. I'm more happy that this, like, I see this as a true, I guess, ending and I guess sequel to Watchmen, because I actually heard another podcast and they were raving about the, like, Watchmen, the TV show, and they're just like, I think it's better than the graphic novel, and I'm just like, okay, I think you're
I feel a lot of people are like running defense for this show. There seems to, like, this is like, again, I've got no kind of source behind this, but I feel like there's a lot of people online and in the news and stuff, with the media, running like really hard defense for this show, which isn't that good, right? Like, even just like small shit doesn't get explained in it. Like, they have like True, who like buys the farm, and there's like a big rocket that kind of lands at the end. Does that get explained? It's supposed to be an analog or a reference to Superman, but it doesn't get explained at all. There's heaps of plot elements that aren't explained in the show, and again, this is the reason why I don't like the way Lindelof writes. I think it's really bad, and like the fact that people enjoy it. No offense, because I know, I know you enjoy it.
I do enjoy I think the Leftovers was pretty alright. But
I
yeah,
haven't
like
seen Leftovers, so I can't comment on that.
and some episodes of Lost. But you know, like obviously his main thing is Prometheus, and I think majority of people hated that and how
I keep forgetting he made. I keep forgetting
exactly. And then once you realize Prometheus, like like
Prometheus is horrible.
Exactly.
I have to keep telling people about how bad Prometheus is because they don't seem to realize. Like look, it wasn't like the sequel to that movie was like super amazing either. The
I thought Alien Covenant was okay.
I thought it was okay. I thought it was a better. You see, Alien Covenant is the Last Jedi to Alien Covenant's The Rise of Skywalker.
Basically,
right?
it's like we're gonna try to fix everything that happened. The thing before because we didn't explain how like Xenomorphs happened, but we'll give you an explanation now.
But it's all really rushed. But it'll be really rushed and stuff like that. Even though it looks great and Anyways, we'll get to our Rise of Skywalker review soon enough. But there's a lot of stuff in this show, like the whole mystery behind like the grandfather and he used the the Cyclops device to make the chief of police kill himself. That seems like a cop out as well, because they took a whole episode of his origin to explain what Cyclops is and that he got that mind control device and then he used it on the chief to kill himself because the chief was a white supremacist. And he found that out. You find that out in the last episode. Is the only reason he found out that was the case was because John went back in time to talk to him, and then because he's constantly in contact with himself at all states in time, he gave information about the future to the past. Well, Angela gave information about the future to her grandfather in the past, and that set the events of the show itself. It's an Ouroboros, and I get it, and it's supposed to be a chicken and the egg scenario, which, by the way, they use a lot of egg analogies, but there isn't a much like how they use analogies to certain things. For example, in Doomsday Clock, they use glass. Glass is what they use as a metaphoric or a thematic element throughout the comics. In this show, they use eggs.
To be origin, something like that. First, yada yada. There's a lot of, it's still it is still kind of I don't know. There's a lot of things that where I think it's trying to be high art, but it isn't.
Exactly.
And that's why I'm saying when we're going back where people are it's better than the graphic novel. I say to you that the graphic novel works in so many ways. It doesn't just tell a narrative story where the bad guy wins and it kind of tricks you in the end, but it really is a meta breakdown of superheroes, especially at its time. This doesn't have any of the extra elements of reading into it. It really is shallow. It's like when people say, oh yeah, Inception was so deep because I didn't understand it, but it's very simple and easy concept. It's in this show it kind of does the same thing where it's Watchmen, it was a deconstruction of superheroes as well, and it did all these things about saving the world and all this different type of meta commentary, and this essentially just has meta commentary of white supremacists are bad, but they don't really do anything with it, and it's not as smart as you think it is. It's in the end, why this whole review we've been doing this whole far, we haven't talked about the main character Angela really, because she just exists in the kind of show to really get information from everyone else who seems to be more important than her. She's just kind of there.
Yeah, correct. Well, here's the thing. She doesn't seem important until the very episode where, you find out that her husband is actually John, aka Dr. Manhattan, right? And it's just wait, what? And then it's not even explained why John or Dr. Manhattan decided to come back and date her, other than the fact that destiny decided that it would be the case. And even in the Doomsday Clock series, there is a sinister and fundamental motivation that continues on from the graphic novel as to why John interfered with the DC universe. That's the whole basis of it. and I forget which issue it is. It might be like issue like 9 or 10, where they kind of have a background of John coming into the multiverse and finding out like, oh, manipulating Superman changes the the entire known multiverse, and that gives him like this god complex, and it gives him this like rush of not adrenaline because he's a fucking godlike entity, but you know what I mean? Like it's like he feels that power that comes from manipulating, and he does it to a sinister level. And the events of Doomsday Clock is him and everybody in the DC universe trying to stop him, and Superman confronting him about the actions that he did and how it's and whether or not there is a distinct conclusion, while also retroactively reconning the New 52 events in a way, right? And not in a way. Again, I won't spoil what exactly happens, but it's really excellent, and it does. And like Dr. Manhattan's character seems very consistent in the comic, whereas in this it just seems like he's there, and he decided he makes as he says at the end of Watchmen, he goes away and he says, well, I'm going to make my own life somewhere else. And in the DC universe, he does make his own life, life. Like he makes the New 52 universe, right? In this show, he makes life on, I don't know, a moon of Jupiter or some shit, and that's like a basis to put Ozymandias in prison. By the way, I just want to
we're talking about
I actually like Jeremy Irons as an older Ozymandias. I think he does an excellent job at kind of being a a older version of the character, very up himself, very egotistical, very narcissistic.
And I think when you get an actor like Jeremy Irons, he's always going to do a really good job. And it's like I did completely believe him as basically as an old Ozymandias. There's certain things that he does where I'm like, okay, he should be smarter than this type of thing, but I don't know, is he just acting stupid on purpose because they're
on purpose for the plot, for plot reasons.
Not only for plot, but also because like you could explain like, because they're clones and he doesn't give a shit. Like that's what I kind of got from it. Because there's certain parts where I'm like, he probably wouldn't do that or say that, but because they're clones and he doesn't give a shit because they're not real, he's just like, whatever.
Oh, right, like how he's like completely detached from caring about the clones of...
Or that, or like when he's in court, he just, he farts for no reason, and just like, I'm assuming it's because he's just bored. I'm assuming because it's bored and he just doesn't care, so...
He doesn't care, But it just seems like really, again, this show, like, it's a very David Lindelof things to just do weird shit for the sake of being eccentric. Like, again, it's written all over Lost, it's written all over Prometheus, it's very surface level, and shallow. It doesn't really add much to the actual show itself. And I just want to also point out that Laurie Blake, played by Jean Smart, I like her role. Like, it's very different to her role in the comic, but she does sell it as, she seems like she's over vigilantism, and she is interested in trying to find out who is behind the events of what's happening in this, like, small town of Tulsa. And then kind of almost being like a character who's running parallel with Angela's character as well. You know what I mean? Like, it's there's a good like contrast between the two, because obviously she hates vigilantes.
But I don't know. I think in the last like 2 episodes, she doesn't really do anything. She just like, her plot kind of dies out after a while, and then she kind of comes back in the end to do detective stuff. It's like,
that's correct.
So I'm kind of a little bit disappointed in that.
But again, the whole thing about the whole plot is essentially, what is it?
Some fake whites. Someone basically some lady is using it.
Here. I'll explain it. So Will Reeves is told, becomes, a vigilante. When back when he was younger, like the first vigilante known as the Hooded Justice, who joins the Minutemen, he retires, but then gets prompted by Dr. Manhattan about Cyclops coming back, and so he returns, and he prepares with Lady True, the owner of True Industries, to come up with a plot to protect, to kind of stop. Sorry, to stop. What is it? Cyclops. But True, having her own interest, wants to use Cyclops and the technology that Cyclops has, because they want to, and through her resources finds out that they want to trap Dr. Manhattan. She wants to also help them to do that, and that leads to the events in the Watchmen TV series where the chief of police gets killed by Will Reeves, and sets off the events of the TV series. Like, that's essentially it.
Yeah.
It's not super complicated. It's not super interesting. Oh, sorry. It is complicated. But
if it's complicated, doesn't necessarily mean it's an engaging story or deep as more than you think it is. That's why I feel that's what people, we're currently talking about it again, but like something like Westworld, where it's like, just because you have different plot points and you're trying to make it more interesting than it actually is, it's still like, if you just made this in a narrative one way, like, I personally think it would be better, but you lose that interest of like, ooh, what's guessing what's next and what's happening, and I think that's what
this is for season 2, right?
For season 2 especially. But it's kind
season
of the
1. I think season 1 was nicely paced.
The nicely paced. Season 2, they just used that as a gimmick, and I feel like Witcher kind of semi did this, and kind of Watchmen, the way Lindelof kind of writes, it's like, I'm going to reveal everything in the last 2 episodes, so everything that you see for like 6 or 7 episodes will not make any sense up until this point, and be like, aha, you see, I got it all along. It's like that kind of gotcha moment where it's like, I explained it later instead of keeping you hanging.
Yeah, there's the show is very complicated in terms of what it tries to say, but the problem is it doesn't say a lot. And that's ultimately Watchmen in a nutshell. And it's a shame, because I watched all the episodes, and I really did want to give this show a go and see exactly what it did with its approach of trying to entangle a lot of things like racism and the stuff that they do in the original series, politics and vigilantism,
or even commentary about cops as well. Like, I feel like in the first 2 episodes, the first 2 episodes, they talk about like cops, and like maybe they might be a little bit what do you call it, like corrupt, and kind of maybe they're using too much of their power, kind of like a good kind of take on stuff, but they completely drop what the whole cop thing, and that's what I'm saying, where they implant all these ideas that, like, it's there for the week by week, being like, oh man, I can't believe what's going to happen next, what's happening. It's it's there for that water cooler moment, but some of it just really depends on the writer at the time. It's like, where does the story go, and what should I basically reveal or not? And I think that's kind of the problem that I have.
Again, I think it didn't do a lot with the themes that it was trying to explore, in my opinion. Again, our opinion about it. It had a lot of interesting ideas, but none of them they all felt like they were either half-assed or left unchecked, and the justification will be, oh, well, there's going to be another season, so it'll be explored then. I don't give a shit. Like, this show ended up being the hot trash that I expected it to be. It just, like, in between the trash, there are some nuggets of gold in between.
Essentially, it looks good because of the cinematography and the music choices and the way it kind of has everything. But like, surface level, really good. When it comes to actually the nitty gritty of things, it's pretty bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Again, like I said, episode 5 is probably my favorite episode of the series, called A Little Fear of Lightning.
And I think mine is pretty much the Dr. Manhattan episode. I think episode 8. I feel like I just like the character of Dr. Manhattan, and I feel like having a person or character like that is very interesting to have, and especially when they talk to humans, I feel like it's interesting.
The thing with episode 8 is it's very much a narrative story that is designed in very similar to the way that Dr. Manhattan, there's an issue in the graphic novel which is centered around Dr. Manhattan, like, going back and forth in time and explaining his origin, and I'm in a bar and now it's 1984, or now it's the present. Like, he kind of goes back and forth, and that's what the episode kind of does. It kind of does like a visual version of that. But yeah, ultimately, Watchmen. It's if you have time and you like HBO shows, or if you like David Lindelof, you might enjoy this.
Or if you're a person who doesn't know anything about the graphic novel and is like, well,
yeah,
this, you know,
that's true.
I don't know anything about it. Let's watch this show about like racism, because that's probably what they probably take out of it, but it's nothing.
Well,
to do with it at all.
surface level racism,
Basically.
not anything that it doesn't say much about. It's like, other than racism is bad and white supremacists are bad. Yes, no shit. But yeah, I guess